The latest migration figures have been published this morning. As usual, they tell a number of different stories about the number of people coming to and leaving the UK. So let's look at some of the numbers. This time last year, net migration stood at 273,000. Now it's fallen to 244,000. But the decrease of 29,000 is classed by the ONS as statistically insignificant. Net migration from the EU is currently at 90,000, and from outside the EU, it's 205,000. A net total of 52,000 British nationals left the UK in the year to September. The new immigration statistics come hot on the heels of a new release showing a marked slowdown in the final quarter of 2017 in the growth of EU nationals working in the UK. But the figure still grew by 101,000 to a total of 2.35 million EU nationals working here. By the last quarter of 2017, there was an absolute fall of 53,000 in the number of working nationals from the EU 8 countries like Poland that joined in 2004, and an absolute fall of 68,000 non-UK and non-EU nationals working here. Well, to dig into these numbers, let's talk to the BBC's head of statistics, Robert Cuff. Thank you for joining us. Can you explain how reliable these figures are?
Well, they're based on a survey with all of the uncertainties that includes. So a migrant is somebody who plans to stay in, who's going to stay in their new country for at least a year, and the ONS ask people at random coming through the airports and ports where they come from, how long they plan to stay for, and why they're coming. And so it's a survey, just like an opinion poll, so there's a margin of error around that, around plus or minus 40,000 on the headline figure. So that's why the decrease of 29,000 isn't statistically significant. And there's also questions of definition. You know, a migrant is someone who's going to stay for a year. We ask them how long they're going to plan to stay, and plans change. Now, the survey is checked back against the census, against national insurance number, card issuances, and against visas as well. But it's still best not to read too much into just one quarter of data unless the number is really striking or is consistent with the pattern we've been seeing over a while.
Well, on that basis, what can we read into it?
Well, as you say, there's no real change in the headline figure, but that's masking something a little bit more interesting underneath. What we're seeing is a different picture for EU migrants and non-EU migrants. So for EU migrants, the trend that we've seen since the Brexit referendum of a decline continues apace. So down from, I think, about 165,000 to about 90,000 net last year, and we keep on seeing, and that is statistically significant. That's being slightly masked by an increase in non-EU migration. That's up by about 40,000, and so when you add those two together, they kind of cancel each other out a little bit. But there's different things going on for each of them. As I say, it's a consistent pattern over time for the EU migration, but for non-EU, the ONS say they think it came down a little bit last year to do with people studying, not being picked up in the visas, but not in their survey, and it's back up to the level it was before. So it's harder to know whether that's going to be a trend into the future. All
right, Robert Cuff, thank you very much. Well, we're joined now by Alp Mehmet, the Vice Chair of Migration Watch UK, and of course my guest of the day, Faiza Shaheen, is still here. Her think tank have just published a report arguing Britain is an overworked and underpaid nation. More of that a little later. Faiza, this country has added a population almost the size of a city of Southampton size last year. Is that a problem?
It's really hard for me to get involved in this debate about the numbers up and down, because I think there's a broader issue here of immigration and immigrants being scapegoated year after year for a number of problems. So, you know, we often hear issues of wages blaming on immigration, issues of housing blaming on immigration. And the truth is, it's been bad government policy and more employer exploitation of workers.
But do the numbers matter, Faiza? I mean, are they not important to look, if you're a government or even if you're a member of the voting public, you want to see the figures of what's going up and what's coming down?
We've made the numbers matter because we've told people, when they've believed it for so long, that this is the crown as to, you know, if you stop immigration, then other problems will get sorted. So we've told people they matter, so we fixate on them. So it's no surprise there. You know, it is, you know, actually attracting talent to this country is possibly a sign of an economy that is inviting people. But look, the end point here is we need people in certain sectors. We have a history in this country of both emigration and immigration, and let's look at it in that historical context.
Mehmet, there's been too much focus on the numbers, and the government has made it that way in order to fit a political narrative. Should there be more focus on trying to perhaps fix the problems of increasing population numbers as a result of immigration?
I would argue that there hasn't been sufficient focus, frankly. You can't ignore the figures. 250,000 net, which has come down from over 300,000. It's what that adds over a period to population, and an increasing population at the present rate. We're talking about another 10 million people in 25 years. 90% of which will be the result of immigration. You cannot go on that way. And going back to the figures with regard to EU nationals coming here to work, yes, the scale has come down, but there are still many more arriving than are leaving. And in fact, if you look at the numbers who were given national insurance cards last year of 500,000, the fall is really where they've come to look for work rather than come for work.
And you want to turn hundreds of thousands of them away?
I don't want to turn anyone away who hasn't a right to be here, or indeed who who doesn't qualify to come here. I'm not about closing the doors and the gates and pulling up the drawbridges.
But you want the numbers to come down by hundreds of thousands?
We want a reasonable, even coming down by 100,000, we're still way, way above what we were 15, 20 years ago. And if you look at the net migration figure from the EU of 90,000, the latest one, that's actually double what it was in 1997 overall.
Right. Do you agree with Diane Abbott that immigration and the debate around immigration, she says, is still being used as a euphemism for race?
No, no, no. She is wrong now, and she has always been wrong on that one. People like me, people who take part in your programme daily, we're either first, second or third generation immigrants. Immigration will not stop. It's not racist to be concerned about the rate of migration.
Right. That's not what she was saying, though. I think the point is that too often the way in which these immigration debates, and we hear it, it's scaremongering. It's like, oh, these people are coming from abroad, and we're not talking about, often these people are cooking, cleaning and caring for our parents and our kids.
No one is saying that. You are saying that.
That's what we hear, and that's what comes through. And how would you explain then, you know, this around the Brexit campaign and afterwards, this uptick in the number of xenophobic, racist attacks, for instance?
Well, hang on, but there isn't the evidence necessarily to actually back that up.
Well, there is a lot of evidence, actually, and a lot of people don't report these things.
It's disputed, that evidence.
But, I mean, what I would say...
There is no evidence at all, actually.
I mean, the evidence about that is disputed. I mean, are you sort of choosing a political narrative that fits a policy? You agree with Diane Abbott that immigration is a good thing for this country and should continue at the levels that we have now. I mean, she said, just to be clear yesterday, that in some political quarters, it is used, concern about immigration, as a euphemism for race. Do you agree with her?
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes some people, not all people, use it as a way, you know, Nigel Farage's of the world, that use it as a way to play in and get to people's prejudices and to stoke that up. And that's not OK. The conversation we should be having is, given that we have shortages in certain areas, given that what we might want to do, given demographic change and ageing population, is how the demographics of our society will change and how they've changed up to date, and the positives of that as well, of course, like a multicultural society and something that reflects the empire, because, you know, the reason that people like me are here is because of those links, those historic links. So, you know, look, this isn't a conversation about being precise about this number or that number. Let's think about what this country needs and work back from that.
It's exactly what we're saying. What we're also saying, though, not at the present scale. That is not in anyone's interest. And I have to say that what Diane Abbott is saying was a device that has been used all along to close down debate on immigration, and that cannot happen.
I mean, are you thinking about, for instance, and I've done research on this, the ways in which Eastern European immigration was exploited by employers that would play them off amongst the existing population? That wasn't the fault of the Polish people coming in. That was how temping agencies were using this device. So, you know, what can we do about employers, about temping agencies that are allowing this exploitation to happen?
When the Romanians and Bulgarians were going to have free access to our employment employment market, that we were told would be a small number coming in, as we were in 2003. In fact, we forecast around 50,000, which is exactly what it is at the moment. You cannot say it's not going to happen, not plan on it,
No, of
and
course,
then when
no,
it does
of course,
happen,
and that's why you want. Why
when it does
Conservatives-
happen, then say, oh, but it's a good thing.
Right,
which is
but,
exactly
but
what's
looking
happened.
at the scale, you say that immigration can't continue at the scale it's been going, but what do you say about the figures? They are mixed, I accept, about the number of nurses and health workers, EU nationals, they have fallen. Are those not people we need?
There are all sorts of people that we need, including nurses, and there is absolutely no reason why they shouldn't continue to
Well, they're
come
not. They're
here.
falling, the number of EU nurses and health workers.
Not because anyone is sending them away.
I'm
or
not saying that, but
stopping
you were
them coming
talking
in.
about whether we need immigration at that scale. Do we need that number of nurses?
We should also be thinking about training our own nurses in a way that we haven't done, our doctors and all our other experts that we have failed to train.
I mean, Faiza, is it prejudice to want any restriction to immigration?
No, I mean, I think, we're not in a situation where we can just suddenly have open borders. Given the inequality in the world, of course, more people would come here. And,
We agree on that.
we want to, we have to manage that. But my point is that we fixate on a particular part of the equation that, the evidence shows that the reasons why, wages have been driven down in some sectors, why there's issues of housing, immigration is not the number one reason for that. And even people doing the research at the OECD or the World Bank will tell you that again and again, it's about
migration
to do with
plays far more into that than we have been given to believe.
No,
Right,
it's a lack of building
But Faiza,
houses, actually.
Sure, but that's been successive governments. I mean, how do governments plan for large numbers of people, which you can't predict necessarily, coming to Britain to work? How could you build all the schools and hospitals in time for, waves of immigration?
Look, I agree that they didn't expect so many people to come after accession, and they planned for that quite badly. And then they made a migration impact fund, which was actually the right thing to do to help those communities. We know that people coming were paying in quite a lot of taxes, but those communities weren't, quite ready with the schools, etc. But that impact fund was cut by the Conservative government, and that's exactly the sort of thing we need to do. But look, over time, even if we leave the EU, when we make trade deals with China and India, etc., we are still going to have immigration.
No impact fund will ever be ever be sufficient to cater for the sort of numbers that are coming in at the moment.
And just briefly, do you think there has been a Brexodus then since that vote?
That's one thing that very clearly hasn't happened. Notwithstanding what people were suggesting, the scale has come down, some have left, but that was always happening anyway. When you look at the figures, more in fact are arriving than are leaving. And if you look at those who have applied for British citizenship, they're at their peak at the moment, something like 45 to 50,000 applying last year. So clearly there's a lot of people who don't want to leave.
Alt Mehmet, thank you.